that there was nothing left of my leg below the knee. And the only way I was going to get free, I was going to have to cut my leg off. I pulled up to the well site and parked my truck about 50 yards away, got out and was maintaining the engine, checking the unit. This site consisted of an engine, and then through a series of drive shafts ran a saltwater pump which moved the salt water from one site to another. And it was at that time that I had done what I had done hundreds and thousands of times before. I stepped over the moving shaft. Once the safety guard is moved, then of course the shaft is totally exposed. I didn't really notice the guard was off until I was, stepping over it, and of course at the point of when it had grabbed me and sucked me in. At first, I wasn't sure what had happened because I immediately felt the pull and the throwing. It was like someone slamming me in the back, especially the lower body, with maybe the force of a car. And as I landed on my left leg and disengaged the motor, I could see my ankle and the bottom part of the hip boots laying about 25 feet away. And that's when I realized that this machine had not only separated my ankle from the rest of my foot, but also had pretty much destroyed all of my leg below the knee. It was really a moment of disbelief. I seen my foot in the boot. I was trying to understand what had happened. It had thrown me around. And I guess at that point in time, I realized that, my life was in jeopardy and that something was gonna have to be done. That's when I looked down and seen the blood and everything as well below me. At this point, I was still not really feeling any pain. I was faint and felt very nauseous and knew that I'd lost a lot of blood, but not really any pain. The feeling was one of urgency. I knew I had to do something to better my chances of surviving. I was caught up in this machine. Blood was going everywhere. And time was being minimized pretty quickly as to what I had to do. I looked down and see everything below my knee was wrapped around the shaft, that there was nothing left of my leg below the knee. And the only way I was going to get free, I was going to have to cut my leg off. As I took the knife off of my belt, which I just started wearing 2 weeks before that, and I started to cut, I dropped the knife, maybe out of the instinct of, this is not right. I shouldn't be cutting myself. At the time when I dropped the knife, I reached in front of me and opened up a 1-inch water valve, which was used to bleed and to bleed air out of the pump. I splashed some of the salt water in my face and my mouth. It was very sulfur-based, coming from 3,000 foot down. That stung a lot. It was nasty tasting. I attribute that to keeping me awake and conscious. And then I reached back for the knife, realizing that was my only option to get free of this machine. After many years of dressing and skinning out deer, knowing how tough the skin was, that led to some knowledge that I had, knowing that there was no way I was going to pull free, that there was going to have to be another option. I knew that my bone had been broken, the femur bone. There was nothing solid connecting me. It had taken everything just above the knee. That's where I was still connected. Once I picked the knife back up, It was a clean slice, just a matter of seconds. Not even sure I can tell you that I looked at it. Just knew where my leg was, where I was connected, and made a quick sweep of the knife and cut free. After the initial feeling, I believe the adrenaline kicked in and everything else. And I think there was more focus on surviving than the pain itself. Even though I was closer to my truck, I thought my better chance of getting help was making my way to the highway, which is twice as far away as my truck. So I started crawling, much like you would under ropes, army type of crawl, using my arms and what I could with my left leg. I looked down and blood was gushing out of my leg, the open wound. It was just going everywhere. I knew I was going to have to try to restrict the flow of blood out of my limb. And that's when I pulled my belt off and wrapped it around what was left of my leg, found a piece of driftwood and twisted it and got the pressure strong enough, hopefully, to where it would restrict the flow of blood. I was really in fear of my life, and at moments would still have thoughts of my family. How would my wife make it without me? How would my brothers, and my parents, how would they do without me if I did die? As I was crawling, a couple of vehicles went by, and they did not notice me, apparently. But then it was just within a minute that I did hear brakes, and then more brakes, and I knew that some vehicles were stopping, and I hoped that they were stopping because they saw me. It was really quite strange because it was two guys that I knew, served on the volunteer fire department with them. One went to the scene to see if there was anything that could be done there. The other knelt by me and started speaking to me. He was asking me questions as to, was there anything left of my leg, anything that could be saved or reattached. I told him no, that everything was mangled and pretty much wrapped up in the shaft. And then he kept asking me other questions to keep me conscious and to reassure me that help was on its way. I was still concerned about the amount of blood that I'd lost and still concerned about living. The ambulance arrived, immediately put an air cast type of splint on my leg, stopped the blood from flowing. They also initiated 3 IVs, try to get the fluids built back in. The emergency personnel was very cool and calm, very reassuring, but you could still see the concern on their faces of course, the blood loss and the possibility of me slipping away. I continued to ask the emergency doctor, am I going to live? He's in the process of calling for helicopter support for transport. All 3 helicopters that are normally available were not available. So I was transported with a police escort to an orthopedic hospital around 57 miles away. I had 3 surgeries before my leg was sewed back up, and 15 days in a hospital before I went back home. And rehabilitation, learning to walk again with a prosthesis. And I was back on the job within 9 months exactly to the date of my accident. I survived because of the grace of God giving me the opportunity, the instinct and the ability to assess the situation very quickly was a key, I believe, in allowing me to survive this accident.